Welcome back to Bookish Dives. It's great to be back. You know, we've done a couple of these deep dives together now, and today, we're tackling Psychedelics by David Nutt. This one, it's pretty mind-bending.
Yeah, David Nutt, he's really a leading voice in this whole field. And, you know, he's not afraid to challenge a lot of the conventional thinking when it comes to these substances, especially psychedelics.
Right. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. I mean, this book is dense, right? It's packed with history and science and all these possibilities. We're going to pull out the most interesting takeaways for you.
Yeah, think of it this way. We're your guides, your psychedelic Sherpas, you know, leading you through all this complex terrain.
I like that. Okay, so the book, it kind of takes us back in time, back in the 1950s. And, you know, it's wild to think that back then, substances like LSD and psilocybin, they were actually seen as like promising medical tools. They were even being marketed to researchers. Like, can you imagine? By Sandoz, the pharmaceutical company.
It's hard to imagine now, isn't it? Especially with all the stigma that's been attached to these substances. But back then there was like real scientific curiosity, this belief that these compounds could help treat, you know, all sorts of conditions.
Yeah, and then boom, the 60s. Psychedelics get all mixed up with the counterculture, right? And suddenly, bam, they're banned.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, was it really just about health concerns? Or was there something more going on?
Well, Nutt argues it wasn't just about the risks. He thinks psychedelics, because they can, you know, change how you see things and challenge authority, they were seen as a threat, you know, like a threat to the social order, especially with all the upheaval and anti-war sentiment at the time.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, did we miss out on the scientific potential because of fear? But here's the thing. The history of psychedelics, it goes way back. I mean, way before the 60s.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking like thousands of years. There's evidence they were part of ancient rituals and spiritual practices. You know, the ancient Greeks, for example, the Eleusinian mysteries. They had this drink, the sacred drink called kykeon, and they think it might have contained ergot fungus, which has, you know, LSD-like effects.
Wait, seriously? So like ancient psychedelic raves?
Maybe not raves,
Yeah,
definitely rituals where they wanted to achieve altered states. And there's this theory that the origins of Hinduism, they're linked to mind-altering substances. They call them soma. It seems like, you know, humans have always had this complex relationship with these substances, these things that, you know, change how we experience the world.
Yeah, so from ancient rituals to the labs in the 50s and then the counterculture movement, psychedelics have had a pretty wild ride. But let's get into the science of it all. How do these substances actually affect the brain? And what does it feel like to be, you know, under their influence?
Well, basically, they work on the brain's serotonin system. They target these specific receptors, 5-HT2A receptors, which are really important for how we perceive things, our emotions, our sense of self.
So that's why they can cause such like dramatic shifts in perception and emotion.
Right.
Like all those visuals and the merging of senses, even feeling like you're dissolving into your surroundings. It's like the brain's filters are gone.
Exactly. It's like shaking up the brain's routine, you know, allowing new connections to form. But Nutt emphasizes these experiences, they vary a lot. It depends on the person, the substance, the context. You know, some people, they feel euphoria, bliss. Others might feel anxious or scared, especially if they have a history of trauma.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it amplifies what's already there emotionally. So being prepared, having a good environment, that's really key. It's not just a joyride, right? And Nutt really goes deep into the specifics of each psychedelic too. Debunking myths and giving insights into their unique effects.
He covers the whole spectrum: LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, mescaline. He even talks about the dangers of synthetic psychedelics like NBOMs.
Let's start with LSD, probably the most notorious psychedelic. It's crazy how its reputation has been shaped by, you know, years of propaganda. Nutt sets the record straight. He debunks all those crazy stories about fried brains and permanent psychosis, you know, the fear-mongering.
What's important is that Nutt, he doesn't ignore the risks, right? He talks about them, but he emphasizes responsible use, the right dosage. He's all about being informed and balanced.
So next we've got psilocybin, the magic mushrooms. And the book tells this fascinating story of R. Gordon Wasson. He was a banker who became like obsessed with mushrooms, an ethnomycologist. And he went to Mexico in the 50s to experience these Mazatec mushroom rituals with this curandera, Maria Sabina.
Oh, wow.
So like a real-life Indiana Jones, but with mushrooms.
Watson's experiences, he wrote about them later, and they were really important in introducing psilocybin to the West.
It's such a cool blend of ancient wisdom, right? And modern science. And speaking of ancient wisdom, we can't forget ayahuasca, that brew that's used in the Amazon rainforest by indigenous cultures. And, it's been getting a lot of attention lately for its potential therapeutic benefits. But it's definitely not for everyone.
No, it's not. The book actually mentions this comedian, Mawan Rizwan. He tried ayahuasca for a BBC documentary, and
Yeah.
he talks about the purging, the physical purging, and the really deep insights he gained.
You're not just having a latte, right?
Yeah.
It's a deep, deep dive, often with some intense physical stuff going on.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about DMT, this potent psychedelic that creates such vivid but short experiences. People describe it as like traveling to other worlds.
Yeah, Nutt talks about how it comes from the Sonoran desert toad
Yeah.
and the controversy surrounding its use because it's unregulated. It's a fascinating substance, but one you got to be really careful with.
It's like strapping yourself to a rocket. You got a good pilot. And there's mescaline from peyote and San Pedro cacti. And Nutt brings in Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, who is, a big figure in the psychedelic movement.
Yeah, Huxley's mescaline experiences, he wrote about them in The Doors of Perception, and they really influenced how people saw these substances. He described these profound changes in perception, the heightened awareness of beauty, feeling connected to everything, like transcending the everyday.
Wow. And lastly, Nutt talks about NBOMs, these synthetic psychedelics that are they can be pretty dangerous. He emphasizes, harm reduction, being informed, the risks of buying these things on the street.
It's a reminder that while psychedelics have this promise for science and therapy, you have to be responsible.
Okay. Well, that was quite the tour. But now I want to shift gears and talk about the therapeutic potential. This is where things get really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Like Nutt's research on psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, it's amazing. He's had some really encouraging results showing how these substances can help people who, haven't responded to traditional therapy.
Like a new hope.
Right?
For people who have tried everything and still struggle with depression.
Yeah.
And the book even talks about Ian, this patient who took part in one of Nutt's trials, and he had these significant improvements.
Ian's story, it's really powerful. He describes it as a weight being lifted. Like he could finally feel joy again after years of just darkness.
It reminds us that behind all the science, there are real people whose lives are being changed. And it's not just depression. There's research on psychedelics for addiction, PTSD, cluster headaches, even Alzheimer's. It's like we're discovering a whole new way to understand the brain and how it can heal.
Absolutely. And while this research is still, in the early stages, the initial results are really promising, like studies on MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. They're showing some really remarkable results.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Like MDMA in a therapeutic setting can help people revisit their trauma without being, completely overwhelmed by fear. So they can process it and move on.
Yeah, it's a whole new way of thinking about trauma therapy.
So we've got all these potential applications, from treating depression to PTSD to exploring consciousness and spirituality. But how do they actually work in the brain? How do they do all this?
That's the big question, isn't it? To understand that, we have to look at the brain on psychedelics. And one of the key things to understand is the default mode network, the DMN.
Okay, break that down for me. What is the DMN?
Yeah.
And how do psychedelics mess with it?
Think of it as your brain's autopilot. It's the network of brain regions that are active when your mind is, wandering, daydreaming, thinking about yourself. It's involved in planning for the future, dwelling on the past, your sense of self.
So it's like the voice in our head that never shuts up.
Yeah, exactly. And psychedelics seem to disrupt that. They hit the pause button on that voice. They create a more fluid state in the brain, allowing for new connections to form.
So they help us break free from those ruts in our thinking, those habits, and see things in a new way.
Exactly. And this disruption of the DMN, that's thought to be one of the key reasons why psychedelics can have these therapeutic benefits. By loosening the grip of our default thinking, they create space for more flexibility, more adaptability, more insight.
Wow. It's like psychedelics give us a glimpse into a different way of being conscious, one that's less about our ego and more about the interconnectedness of everything.
Yes,
It's pretty mind-boggling.
And that's just the beginning. There's so much more to explore. Yeah, like the mystical experiences people talk about. That always fascinates me with psychedelics. People having these profound insights, this feeling of being connected to everything, like the universe.
You mentioned mystical experiences,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a recurring theme, right, in a lot of these stories. And Nutt doesn't shy away from it. He even talks about his research on DMT and how the experiences people have on DMT, they're strikingly similar to near-death experiences. It really makes you question what consciousness is, you know, and what's real.
It really does.
It makes you wonder, are these just, hallucinations, or are they glimpses into something deeper, something that's usually hidden from us? But even if we leave the mystical stuff aside, there's the question of safety, right? Are psychedelics addictive? Are they dangerous?
Those are really important questions, and Nutt tackles them head on. He argues that they're not inherently addictive. Unlike, cocaine or heroin, they don't activate those same reward pathways. So you don't get that same craving, that compulsive need.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But what about the potential for psychological harm? I mean, these experiences, they can be pretty intense.
Well, Nutt stresses that responsible use is key. And that means paying attention to set and setting, like we talked about before. Having the right environment, a clear intention, a trust to guide, those things make a huge difference. He also says it's important to be aware of the risks, especially for people who already have some mental health issues.
So it's like anything else, right? There's a safe way to do it, and then there's a way that can lead to problems.
Yeah.
Education is really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of responsibility, let's talk about microdosing. It's getting a lot of attention lately. Taking these tiny, tiny doses of psychedelics, so small you don't even really feel them. People say it helps their mood, their creativity, their focus.
Yeah, microdosing, it's everywhere. It's like the new trend, right? But does it really work?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. A lot of people say they feel positive effects. But the science, it's not really there yet. Nutt says we need more research to know for sure how effective it is and whether those benefits are really from the substance or just the placebo effect.
So the jury's still out.
Yeah, pretty much. But even with microdosing, it's important to remember these are powerful substances. They should be treated with respect.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the legal stuff for a minute. The laws around psychedelics. It's a mess, right?
Right. It is. It's been a wild ride for these substances, from promising medical tools to symbols of rebellion, and now this renewed interest in their potential for therapy. But legally, they're still mostly schedulized substances, which means,
Yeah, they're basically illegal.
Yeah.
And Nutt has been very outspoken about this. He says it's based on outdated ideas, political agendas, not the science. He points out that psychedelics, when used responsibly, they have a low potential for addiction, and they're relatively safe compared to a lot of things that are legal.
Yeah, like alcohol, for example.
Exactly. So he's saying the law hasn't kept up with what we know.
Right. And this has made research incredibly difficult for decades. It's been really hard to study them properly and explore their benefits. Nutt wants a more rational approach, something based on evidence, on public health, on individual freedom, not these outdated prohibitions.
It's like we're still stuck in the reefer madness era, but things are changing. Slowly, there's this growing movement to decriminalize some of these substances, or even legalize them, at least for therapy.
Yeah, some cities like Denver and Oakland, they've decriminalized psilocybin, and there are efforts to reschedule some psychedelics like MDMA to make research easier and to give people access to them for therapy.
It feels like we're on the verge of a real shift in how we think about these substances, recognizing that they can be, powerful tools for healing and personal growth. But like we said before, we have to be careful. We have to prioritize education and harm reduction.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance, acknowledging the potential benefits, but also recognizing the potential risks. It's about being informed and responsible.
So we've covered a lot of ground, right? The history, the science, the benefits, the risks, the ethical stuff. It's a lot to take in. So where do we go from here? What's the next chapter in this whole psychedelic story?
That's a great question. I think the next chapter is about integration. It's about finding ways to bridge the gap between those extraordinary experiences that psychedelics can bring about and the everyday world.
Integration. It's a word we keep coming back to. It's like the key, right? To really unlocking the potential of these experiences.
Exactly. It's about taking those insights, those shifts in perspective and making them a part of our lives.
Yeah.
Finding ways to make those experiences meaningful,
Yeah.
transformative, not just fleeting moments of awe and wonder.
So it's not just about having the trip, it's about what you do with it afterwards.
Yeah.
How you turn those insights into real change in your behavior, your relationships, how you see the world.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. There are so many different ways to approach integration, journaling, therapy, creative expression, finding support from others. It's about finding what works for each person,
Right.
what helps them make sense of their experiences and use those lessons in their lives.
So integration, it's a journey in itself.
It is. It's a journey of self-discovery. And it's a journey worth taking. Because what's the point of having a profound experience if it doesn't lead to some kind of positive change, some kind of growth, of transformation?
That's a good point. It's like the psychedelic experience is just the seed, and integration is about nurturing that seed, letting it grow into something beautiful, something meaningful.
I love that analogy, and I think it really captures what Nutt is trying to say. He's not just saying use psychedelics. He's advocating for a responsible, thoughtful approach.
Yeah.
One that honors their potential to heal, to expand our consciousness, to help us live more fulfilling lives.
Yeah, it really feels like we're at a turning point,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
With psychedelics, the science is finally catching up, and people are starting to see them differently.
It's a really exciting time to be working in this field. The stigma is fading, and there's this sense of possibility. It's contagious, but like with any powerful tool, you got to be careful.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to approach psychedelics with respect, with intention.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into David Nutt's psychedelics, what are the big takeaways? What do you hope people will remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that psychedelics, they're powerful, they can be transformative, but they're not a quick fix. They're not, magic. They're tools that can help you heal, help you grow, help you, discover yourself, but they require work, preparation, integration. You have to be willing to put in the effort.
Yeah, it's like that saying, 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step. Psychedelics, they might give you a push, but the real journey, it comes after.
Yeah,
the integration.
Exactly. And it's not just about, individual healing. Nutt, he talks about a future where psychedelics could actually help us address some of the big problems in the world, like climate change, social injustice. He says that by fostering empathy, connection, a sense of shared humanity, they could help us change our perspective. Find new solutions, more creative, more compassionate solutions.
That's a pretty bold vision.
It is.
But if psychedelics can help us break free from our old ways of thinking, open our minds to new possibilities, maybe they can also help us break free from those destructive patterns that have caused so much suffering.
It's definitely worth exploring, and that's what I find so inspiring about Nutt's work. He's not just advocating for a change in drug policy. He's advocating for a change in consciousness. A shift in our values, our priorities, to create a more just, a more compassionate, more sustainable world.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired. Like I want to go out and tell everyone about this, about the potential of psychedelics.
Just remember to do it responsibly, thoughtfully, and don't be afraid to be a little skeptical. We still have a lot to learn. We need that enthusiasm, but also that critical thinking.
Yeah. We need to be grounded. But overall, I think this book has given me a new appreciation for psychedelics. Their complexity, their mystery, their incredible potential.
Me too. It's been an amazing journey, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed it, have found it, thought-provoking.
And if you want to dive deeper into the world of fascinating books, be sure to follow Bookish Dives. We'll be back with more deep dives into the books that are shaping our world and expanding our minds.
Until next time, happy reading, and keep those minds open.